This is a Riflewell 1/2 cubic foot safe. I received this from the Amazon Blind Choice Review program to review for free. If you wanted to purchase it yourself, it would cost you $80. They have not paid me for my review, and my opinions are my own. Alright, so in the box you get the safe, a small emergency battery pack, the set of backup keys, and the user manual. When the safe first ships, it is locked and closed, and there are no batteries inside. So the only way to open it is to use the backup keys. You put the key in and you turn it 90 degrees that way. This engages the ring with the bolts, and now the ring can move these bolts in and out. There is a setting button hidden around the back here, and the battery compartment is right there. Now my safe came with a little piece of felt kind of in the door there, I think to keep the door from rattling in shipping. It also inside has a piece of foam and a set of bolts here. There's 4 bolts included. We have holes on the bottom of the safe and in the back of the safe, so you could use either 2 of those or all 4 of those to really bolt this thing down. Obviously, if you don't bolt it down, somebody can just pick up your safe and carry it off. Okay, now to set this up for the digital code to work, we need to install 4 user-supplied AA batteries. And it beeped at me, and let's see how this works. So, 1, 2, 3, 4, confirm, not working. Now the default code is 159. That turns green, now you can move this guy in and out. Now it turned off, and that allows you to move it out but not back in. So if you've done that and got this locked, you need to do 159, and then this thing opens up. Now my battery compartment just fell off there, so let me snap that in hopefully a little better than I did previously. Okay, we got the battery compartment in there. So the green light turned off, so I can close that, but I can't open it again. And so there I can latch it, and once the green light goes out, which takes a few seconds, it clicks, and now this guy is locked. It does not work with the bolts. Now 1/2 cubic foot is pretty small. You're not going to be getting a laptop computer in here, you know, a camera, a pistol, jewelry, cash. You can get small items in here, but don't expect to get anything larger like a laptop in this. We're going to try to program the code. Press the setting button for 1 second, the yellow light flashes twice, and then starts setting code. Okay, I had a beep beep. Input the new user code, 3 to 8 digits. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And press the pound sign to confirm. If the yellow light flashes with 2 buzzer beeps, successful setting. Alright, so let's try that. That worked. We have it open. We can close it. Now that was setting the first code, the default 159. Nope, we have changed the default 159, so that is not working there. Alright, so by setting one code, the default code of 159 no longer works. Now, it allows you to set a second code. So keep the door open, press 0 twice, and then press the setting button for 1 second. So we go 0, 0, setting button, and the yellow light blinks there. Input the new user code, so I'm going to go 789654, and press confirm. It did a double flash. So hopefully now we have 2 codes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That works. Wait for this thing to turn off. Now we'll try 7, 8, 9, 6, 5, 4. That also works. There we go. Okay, I'm illustrating the lockout procedure. If you enter codes incorrectly for a certain amount of time, it will start beeping like this. The first time you do this, it will be locking you out for 20 seconds. If you do it more, it's going to lock you out for 5 minutes. This is the emergency battery box. The only point of this is if the batteries inside your safe have run down and you don't have the emergency lockout keys, you can put 4 AA batteries into this box, plug them into this little jack here, and that will power the safe so that you can use the digital code. Now it has a spot for the 4 AA batteries, it has a little wire here, and the plug is integrated into the front here. I have not yet gotten this plug out. I've been prying with this knife. There we go. So it took me a bit of effort to pry that thing out. And so you can basically plug this guy in. If you have batteries here, it will power the safe from the outside, so that if you don't have these but you do have those, you can open the thing. Also, the manual makes a big deal about don't lock these things inside the safe. Alright, I have taken the batteries out of the safe and I've put them in the emergency battery box. Plug it in, it did a little beep. Of course, it looks like it might have reset the code when the batteries were taken out there. Alright, so apparently if you take the batteries completely out, enough time passes, it will lose the programming code. But the 159 default code will still work for you. So if your batteries completely die and it loses the programming code, you can put batteries in here, plug it in, do the 159 default code, and that'll work. Or if you haven't lost your emergency keys, the emergency key is obviously the easy way to do this. So when you open the safe, there is an LED light that shines inside enough to see things, inside of the safe, so it's not completely dark in there with that LED light. So these are side cut keys. My keys have a number 074, which is also printed on the keyway of this thing here. So I suspect a locksmith, knowing that 074 number, could recut a key for you. It's not a super high security key, but then the whole safe isn't a super high security safe. So the front plate steel of the door here is the thickest steel. That's about 3.5 millimeters thick. The actual steel of the body of the safe here is only about 1.5 millimeters thick. The inside cover here is held on by 3 Phillips screws. So these 2 bolts go through this piece of steel, and there's a plate here that allows them to move. And this is a little cam that's operated by the rotating knob on the front. And the only thing that keeps this from opening is a pin right there. And when that pin goes down, this guy can move forward. So this is the emergency key here. It just pushes that pin down, and so this guy can move in and out when that emergency key is there. So this pin right here is what locks it, and the motor can pull that pin down, or the emergency key can push that down as well. Now if this piece of metal were to bend up, it could go over that pin, for example. And the question to me is, this metal from the ring on the front looks like it's pretty strong. So it's a plasticky ring on the front. So my question is, if somebody really torqued on that ring, would it push this metal past the pin, or would something in the ring mechanism break first? So this is the metal cam that goes down to that plastic ring. I've started removing the locking mechanism here. So it looks like 1, 2, 3, 4 screws here holding on the front plastic cover. So this ribbon cable goes under the circuit board, plugs in up here, and then goes down to the keypad on the front. The circuit board is being held in by pieces of steel that have been bent through these 3 holes. So we basically just bend those up again, and we can pull that circuit board out, and that'll give us extra room on this ribbon cable. It looks like all the circuitry is on this board hidden in the back behind the metal, so that even if somebody ripped open the front plastic, they'd only have this little hole here to work through to try to access the circuitry. Alright, so there is the front plastic that involves the keypad itself and this ring here. I'm going to disassemble this a little more to see how strong that ring is compared to the internal mechanism. So when you pull the ribbon connector off of this guy here, you can take this part and work on it separately. So we're going to take out these 3 screws here. Alright, and there is the keypad unit itself, separated from this knob here. This knob is made out of plastic. There is a metal insert into this plastic knob. It has a decent amount of surface area here. I can't say for certain if somebody really yanked on this knob, if it would bend the metal inside and open the safe, or if the plastic on the knob would break. But the fact that it is plastic gives me hope that maybe it's not strong enough to, really push this guy despite that little pin and this thing here hitting up against the pin. Because, steel is stronger than plastic. It looks like the steel is, about the same thickness as this plastic, but the plastic has a lot more surface area there. And there's a pretty heavy-duty there's a pretty heavy-duty piece of metal in this plastic, and I don't know, it's possible that this joint between the metal and the plastic will start to spin before it will allow this thing to push past that pin. But first, I want to look at the pinout of this guy and see how these cable is connected to the internal circuitry, and if there's any overlap between the motor driver and the pins on this particular cable here. This is a 6-volt solenoid, and the negative pin is connected to the negative that goes out through this ribbon cable. The other pin, however, when it triggers, actually gets driven to negative 6 volts. So you have a 6-volt differential, but it's generating in the circuit board a negative 6 volts. And so I suspect, and also it's not connected to any pin directly on this ribbon cable. So I suspect there's some protective circuitry in here that's protecting against overvoltage conditions of somebody, trying to overvolt this circuit board from the front. So my belief, not having fully analyzed the circuit, is that the electronic circuit is pretty well protected inside the metal case, and you're not going to be able to cause a solenoid to trigger using just access to the external pins on this ribbon cable here. So I believe that the only way to really trigger that through this circuit is going to be typing in the right code. So I think if I were to attack this safe without power tools, I would try ripping the plastic off the front, because essentially all you have to do is break these screws here to rip this plastic off the front. And then there's a hole, which there's one of these screw holes right there. And that hole is very close to this release, which is what that emergency key would normally push down. And so I think you could get a little wire through that hole from the top, come down through here, and just push that release, at which point you could open the safe. So, if I were trying to defeat this safe, I think that's the easiest way to do it, is to rip this plastic off here. Either cut it so that you only have to rip off these, actually I think there's only one screw, yeah, so if you cut it here, there's only one screw through that hole, and this guy doesn't have a screw through it. And so you could cut the plastic here and then rip off that screw, and the screw would fall back in, and then you just take a piece of wire and come in straight through here. If this had been above there, it'd be harder to get by, but it's kind of near the edge here, so I think you could sneak a wire in and push that guy down. So here's a stiff wire I bent, and getting these bends in the exact right place is a lot easier when you have the whole thing open. But to illustrate, you can essentially stick this guy in here and it goes in there, and then you just push on that wire and that solenoid thing just goes in and you could open the safe. So that would require that you cut or rip this plastic piece off the front and rip that screw out. So it's not a non-destructive defeat, but I think it would be relatively easy to do. Potentially, just probably with just a small pry bar and a small wire. So here's another angle on that. Alright, so to convey force from the front of the door to the internal mechanism here, we have a plastic knob with a decent amount of surface area, although it has some cutouts. There's this metal inset into the plastic knob. Then there's this pretty thick piece of metal here that goes to the cam, and it has, this locking kind of indent there, and then this screw that holds that in place. So it seems like we could put a pretty decent amount of force through that whole mechanism and try to just brute force these bolts. The bolts are, they're pretty hefty in size. They're hooked to a relatively small thing here, but they're going through a decent amount of steel there. So it seems like we can put a decent amount of mechanical force in with that mechanism, and the only thing stopping us are these two little screws and this piece of metal plate here, which is going to go up against that solenoid. Alright, let's have this thing with these holes all the way out there. So it came from the factory with this metal just slightly bent upright, or at least it was that way after I opened the case. And so when this cam pushes backwards, it tilts this metal down slightly, and I've never had it not hit that pin there. But you can see it's pretty loosey-goosey. There's nothing in here, there's nothing in the case that reaches down in there to guide this straight. So if this were my safe, I think I would bend that way a little bit before installing to just kind of make this as fair as possible. So there we're definitely hitting that pin. I can feel the plastic knob. Actually, I guess it's not the plastic knob, but I can feel this guy bending, and then it puts a lot of pressure on it. And I hear things cracking and bending. So it looks like that piece of metal is strong enough to resist twisting force on this guy. I expect that plastic knob will break before this guy here gives. I really would have liked some type of a clutching mechanism such that it could kind of spin freely or ratchet click once it got past a certain amount of torque, because physically breaking your safe if somebody tries to open it really hard isn't optimal either. Now, putting this guy back together, you can see there's really no wire management in here. So these wires are kind of free to kind of get stuck in between things and move around. I'm going to try to kind of keep them around this post and down in the bottom here, such that they hopefully won't get caught in any of the internal working mechanisms. I didn't observe super carefully when I pulled it apart, but there didn't appear to be anything that would keep them really out of the way there. They are pretty flexible. There's lots of slack in them, so they'll probably just move around if they're touching something. But it's, there's nothing in the manufacturing process that guarantees they're out of the way. All right, at this price point, I'm reasonably happy with the security of this safe. If you are a locksmith, I am almost convinced that given the 074 number on there, you could cut a new key for it and you'd be able to access it with a key just like that. Now, if you're not a locksmith and you're trying to get in without, breaking the things that are inside of it, my suggestion would be get a pry bar and pry off this plastic cover here, specifically the one screw right there. You want to break off and have that screw drop back inside. And then at that point you can take a bent wire and start poking around until you push that solenoid down, at which point you can open the safe. If you're trying to get in fast, this is 1.5 millimeter steel. An angle grinder, you just do 3 cuts right here, bend that thing up, and it's going to be in there. So it's not a super high security safe. It does not have any fire protection features. It's just bare steel. But if you're trying to slow somebody down from getting into stuff, especially if they don't have tools, this safe will definitely provide you a kind of hotel safe level of security. I would feel comfortable putting a gun inside of this safe to keep it away from a child, as long as you never let them see you enter the code.